I kind of feel like we've forgotten that the relationships that we have are really the most important thing, that they're kind of worth, fighting for. They're worth
Yeah.
digging into.
The opposite of love is not hate, because in order to hate something, you still have to love something. The opposite of love is apathy. This turning away from each other, I don't agree with that thing, so I'm just going to oust you from my life. It's almost resulting in this decent level of apathy in our humanity, which I think that maybe is the most dangerous and toxic.
How do we navigate when we have bumps, when we disagree, and those kinds of things in such a way that we get to have a healthy relationship? I
Right.
think that's where the chaos and stuff, why we're conflict avoidant, is because we don't look at it that way.
Welcome to Courage is Built Here, the podcast. I'm Justine Froelker, licensed professional counselor, author, speaker, and corporate trainer. Here, we bring my Courage is Built Here curriculum to life and community. Each week, I invite a guest to walk one of the 5 courageous pathways with me through authentic, sometimes tough, sometimes hilarious conversations. No performance, no polish, just real people practicing real courage with grit, grace, and a whole lot of love. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Courage is Built Here podcast. Today, we have Pathway 4, Love Others Well, How to Live With, Relate to, and Lead Others Well. This is a huge chunk of the full curriculum. In Love Others Well, we talk about shame resilience. We talk about how shame shows up in us, how it shows up in our relationships and organizations, how we react from it. We talk about empathy and how to meet people where they are, witness their lived experience, which does not require that you agree with them. It also does not require you to let them get away with stuff that's not okay. We talk about hard conversations, feedback, and the big one is probably trust. In today's episode, there's going to be a lot of talk about trust. I love this conversation. My friend Tim Bounds is with me today. Tim was a teaching pastor at the Crossing for a very, very long time, and he is now out on his own. His company is called the Unison Company, and he does leadership development, much like I do in some ways. And so we have a really cool conversation about conflict and how he believes that like deep relationship requires conflict and tension and how that builds trust. And we talk about rupture and repair and hard conversations. And it's just a really, really great conversation. At the end of the day, in order to love and lead others well, you first have to love and lead yourself. It requires owning your part. It requires self-awareness and emotional well-being and values work. It requires all the work of Courage is Built Here. Pathway 4, you need the first 3 pathways to really like get to it, and pathway 5 to put it all together. But pathway 4, love others well, lead others well, influence others well, leave it better than the way you found it. That includes a space and it includes people and relationships. And how do we do that? So let's welcome Tim to the podcast. Welcome, Tim, to the Courage is Built Here podcast. Thank you.
Justine, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm excited. All right.
Yeah.
So you ready for your first question? You know this one's coming. Okay.
Let's do it.
All
Yep.
right. So when you think about courage, most especially through what I call Pathway 4, Love Others Well, is there a story or a moment that comes up for you?
Yeah. There's one particular experience I had where a dear friend of mine and I got into a little bit of a disagreement. This was probably 6 or 7 summers ago, so it's been a while. But I tell this story because we got into a huge disagreement. We were actually with our families. We were outside at this kind of festival thing, and he and I start arguing back and forth, and we both start kind of raising our voices. And I'm the one who crossed the line first. Like I got so angry that I just started to kind of like spout off, hey, here are the things that you're wrong about. I can't remember what I was
Yep.
saying, but I was just very angry and kind of realized I was out of control. So I was like, I got to step out of this conversation. I walked away, went to go throw some trash away that I had in my hand, like napkins or whatever.
Yeah.
And on my way to the trash can, thought of something else, like another dig or another point I wanted to make. So
Uh-huh.
I came back in for round 2. And it was just one of those moments where I was out of control. So that's not the courage part. The
Yeah.
courage part is, the next day I called my friend and I was so embarrassed. My wife and I had a long conversation about it. I called my friend and it was a really hard call. And I just called and said, look, I need to apologize for last night. I'm so sorry. I was out of control, and I'm kind of a little bit nervous now about where we go from here.
Yeah.
And he said to me, and this is just one of those moments that I'll never forget. You've had those experiences as well.
Mhm.
He said to me, "Well, what kind of a friend would I be if you couldn't get mad at me every once in a while and I couldn't figure out how to keep being friends?" So it was just this moment where he offered me this incredible grace,
Yeah.
kind of let me off the hook for the way I behaved, and just called out the importance of the relationship and how we weren't going to let this disagreement
Yeah.
keep us from, working through it and staying friends. So we got together later that evening, talked through some things, and ended up really, really well.
Yeah.
So that was the story that comes to mind. I think the reason it connects me to the idea of courage is partly because it took some courage for me to call him and apologize.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of courage for him to be willing to enter back into the conversation with me, even though he knew I was upset for the sake of the relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the first story that comes to mind.
Yeah. It's it is especially like in so many ways it feels like, I know it's not true, even though it feels like it. It feels like we have, as a humanity, we have lost our ability to disagree.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and except like when you really do think about the people who you love the most, the people you work with the most, like there's no way you agree on every single thing. There's no
No, you
way,
can't.
there's not been a hiccup or where one of us lost our stuff and had to circle back and make it right. And it's just,
Right.
but how much of like that ability, like it's how it's modeled, especially online, is like we're just like done with people. But that's not relationship. Relationship is
Yeah.
rupture and repair over and over and over. And that's
Which
ultimately what he offered.
Yes, that's exactly right, and that takes so much conscious effort to make the decision to do that. You're right. We ghost each other. We
Yeah.
somebody posts something that we disagree with, or we're at a dinner party and somebody says something and it
Yeah.
just hits us the wrong way, and then we have a tendency to go, I don't know what to do from here, and we kind of write
Yeah.
the relationship off, and I think there's a bunch of factors leading to that. Like
Mhm.
we were just talking about this. We live in a time where there's so much there are so many things going on that we all have very strong opinions about
Yep.
one way or another. So that's a part of it. But the other part of it is I kind of feel like we've forgotten that the relationships that we have are really the most important thing.
Yeah.
That they're kind of worth fighting for. They're worth
Yeah.
digging into. And there's a skill there that I think we've lost sight of. So I talk to people all the time about this idea of tension. Tensions naturally exist in a relationship.
Yep.
And we imagine that a perfect friendship or a perfect relationship is one where there are no tensions. And that's just not how it works, you know? Everybody I know that I'm friends with, my wife and I have
Yeah.
tension with each other, and we have to. That's a part of the work of marriage is we have to
Uh-huh.
figure out how to. We actually embrace those tensions and go, okay, I
Mhm.
know you're here and I'm over here,
Mhm.
and we have to figure out how to coexist when we don't agree, and we can still honor the relationship.
Yeah. I always tell people like whether or not it's your team that you work with or your spouse or your friendships, like I would never be married to me. That'd be terrible.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. What's my
like
wife
I'm married
thinking?
to my compliment, right? Like I would never. I mean, there, but like so like if we all thought the same or felt the same about everything or were exactly the like one, how boring. Two, how do
Yeah,
we learn and grow and change? And so it is that element of like, what's it look like to be able to not have the same thoughts or opinions and still
yeah,
choose relationship over everything. Like I always say to my clients, like choose connection over everything.
yeah.
Because if you if you're trying to do it by yourself, it's so much more painful. But I'm also what I am finding, especially because I do think people are just they're just really they're not okay right now. And so it's developing because we've forgotten how to disagree, we've forgotten how to repair trust, or we're not willing to do it because it ultimately takes vulnerability to repair trust.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so we're not willing to go there. We're turning away from each other instead of toward each other. And I think what I'm finding is like it's not. there's a lot of hate right now, but it's actually not, because the opposite of love is
Mhm.
not hate, because in order to hate something, you still have to love something. Like you have to
Right.
like the opposite of love is apathy.
Hmm.
And so like this like turning away from each other, like I'm not going to repair it. We're like I don't agree with that thing, so I'm just going to oust you from my life. It's almost resulting in this like decent level of apathy in our humanity,
Mhm.
which I think that maybe is the most dangerous and toxic.
Right. Yeah. Well, Justine, we end up having shallow relationships.
Right.
And the reason we're apathetic is because they don't really care about those people. I mean, our
Right.
relationship, to put it
Right.
bluntly, like our relationships are only an inch deep. And so
Mhm.
if something happens where we're not friends anymore, well, then, no loss. But what we have forgotten, and all of us have these experiences, is that we have people in our lives where we've gone deep with. And when you get into those deeper relationships, which I would say comes through conflict and
Mhm.
chaos and navigating these tensions. When you get down deeper into those relationships, that's when you establish trust. That's when you start to realize that person's got your back no matter what.
Yeah.
And those are the relationships that are worth living life for. Those are the things we're striving for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you say, I mean, the conflict, most
Hmm.
people don't like, they will do everything in their power to avoid conflict, even though then the very thing that they're avoiding is owning everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, I'm the same way. There's enough conflict in the world, right? Like I don't need to
True.
add more.
Right.
There's
Right.
there's enough chaos swirling that the thought of doing that in somebody with somebody I'm supposed to be friends with,
Yeah.
just sounds like oh, why? Why would I do that?
Mhm.
And so I think that's where it comes down to some of the things that I know you talk about so much. This is where courage comes into it. It's acknowledging I'm afraid of how this might go. I feel some shame. What if we get into the conversation and I actually find out that I'm wrong?
Oof.
I'm way more afraid of being like wrong than I am being right.
Mhm.
And them not hearing me or something like
Yeah.
that. Like I just don't want to be wrong. Um, and so I just want to acknowledge like it's difficult to make the commitment, say, okay, I am going to go have that conversation. I am going to go enter into that chaos with that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
It is like, so I just did a market survey, and there's top 3 issues, but one of the top, and I knew it would come up. I am
Hmm.
avoiding a hard conversation at home and or work.
Hmm.
It's the number one thing that comes up in every single one of my events. Like, I need help having hard conversations. And so we we avoid them, well, because we tell ourselves, because we don't wanna hurt somebody, or because we, like, don't wanna make the relationship worse, except our avoidance of them actually erodes at the trust between us, even if we don't ever name it or they can't
Yeah,
name it,
it
right?
does.
We really avoid it because we're not willing to choose to navigate the discomfort of walking into that conversation and saying, "Hey, like, this is hard for me to circle back. I don't
Hmm.
wanna be wrong, or I'm experiencing some shame," or whatever it might be, or "I lost my stuff, and that was not who I am, and I'm embarrassed." Like, that
Hmm.
ultimately takes vulnerability, but it comes back to, we have to navigate our stuff before walking into that repair, and
We do.
I don't know if there are many people that know how to do that.
Hmm. Hmm. So yeah, so Justine, you tell me where with if somebody was saying I'm avoiding this conversation
Yeah.
and I don't know how to do it, like where would you start with somebody?
Um, well, one, they're not alone. Everyone's doing it. I
Hmm.
think that's one of the
Hmm.
biggest pieces of the courage work. I mean, just because I teach people how to have hard conversations doesn't mean that I like having them,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
they're
They're hard.
hard. They're hard
They
conversations.
suck.
They suck. They do suck. And I will, I always tell people, like, one of the things that it always hits so hard in every keynote, like, stop blaming people for not meeting your expectations, especially the expectations that you have never stated out loud.
Mm,
And that
it's
includes
good.
those hard conversations that you are avoiding. Like, cause how, and we can make it super simple. Like,
Hmm.
we're in a busy season. I need Chad's help at home with something extra. He should know I need his help, but I don't say it. Like, well,
Hmm.
you should know. First off, the word should, right? But like, but I don't say it. I don't have that hard conversation of saying, like, "Hey, I feel like I would want you to pick up extra slack because things are really crazy for me right now, and I feel like I shouldn't have to say that out loud, but I apparently do, and now I'm having resentment." I don't say it when I first have it. I hold on to it for 3 days or oh, 3 weeks, which means like it just eats at you,
Mm-hmm.
resentment and erodes. And then the slightest comment or the smallest frustration tips you over, and
Mm-hmm.
something spouts out of your mouth that you can't take back, that has nothing to do with what is actually going on, because it's about that thing that you didn't say. And so like I I always tell people, like, I've never heard anybody say that, like, I had the hard conversation too soon. It's always, I waited too long.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, I don't know if everybody's this way, but for me, I tend to pile on. Like it's
Ugh.
if it's yeah, if it's one thing, I might try to kind of let that go, but I'm paying
Yeah.
attention, right? And
Oh,
then
yeah.
there's another unmet expectation, and then another one, and now I get to come at you with a narrative and to
Oh,
say,
yeah.
this is a character flaw of yours because I have three examples,
Mhm.
and I mean it's what
Yeah.
I'm rationalizing in my
Yeah.
own head,
Totally.
and that's why there's such value in what you're saying, to be able to, like, at
Yeah.
the first time, be able to go, "Wait a
Yeah.
minute." And
Yeah.
and the other thing you're doing there, and I appreciate, is you're starting with self-awareness. Like, you really are
Good.
starting with, "Oh, this was my unspoken
Right.
expectation,"
Yeah.
right? And so I've
Like,
gotta come to
what do
terms
I
with
need
that.
to own first? Like, really? Because most,
Yeah.
like, that accountability, what's my part? You have a part. Has there ever truly been conflict where both people didn't have some party to it, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, one person may be more at fault, whatever else, but like, what's my part in it is really important. And I will say, like you've been talking about, like, there is a tension here. Like, if something hard happens and you are not in control of your emotions, like your thinking brain is not firing, you are
Yeah.
all up and triggered up. Not the time to have that conversation. You
Totally.
need to take a beat. You need to take a minute. I'm talking about like a walk around the block, 5 deep
Mhm.
breaths, and then you have the conversation. This whole, like, we just hold on to it and then like keep the rap sheet and it ruminates on it. And then, cause that's like, I mean, marriage counselors will call it, like, oh, the kitchen sink fight, where you throw in
That's it. Yeah.
everything, including the kitchen sink,
100%.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you're like me, you just end up like, that's what wakes me up at 3 in the morning. And now it's an hour and a half of me trying to figure out what's wrong with me and what's wrong with my
Oh,
wife,
yeah.
or I
Yeah.
picking on my wife, but it could be anybody. But like,
It could,
what's
yeah.
what's wrong with
Anybody.
the situation
Yeah.
and it just comes down to, I spent too much time ruminating and
Mhm.
adding up the score,
Yeah.
instead of saying I got to go and have this
Yeah.
conversation early.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, for sure. I
I,
think yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say the other thing for me is, going back to that self-awareness piece
Mhm.
is just, w I like, a lot of times these emotions in our heads, w we're feeling them, we're experiencing them, but we haven't called them out, we haven't named them,
Ooh,
right?
yep. Totally.
So, a lot of times it's coming to a place of going, I'm now really upset, and I realize that what I'm upset about is not the thing that my friend said. It's that if he's right, or if we can't get on the same page about this,
Mhm.
I could lose that relationship.
Mm.
Or I'm so embarrassed at the way that I acted that I
Yeah.
can't bring myself to confront my own shame
Yeah.
in the conversation, to be able to go, okay, I just haven't worked through those things. And so
Yeah.
I'll put it off and put it off and put it
Yep.
off.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
The so we're being governed by our emotions instead of being the master of them.
Hmm.
Um, and it's, yes, it's self-awareness. It's also the, like, that the emotional well-being part. Like, those emotions are warning lights on the dashboard
Hmm.
and basically are telling you like something's off. You're outside your values, something butted up against something's off. And what do
Yeah.
you need to get curious about to own what you need to own in order to walk into and turn back toward the relationship, to say like, this is what I need to own. And dang, like, maybe like, uh, do you have something to own too? Like, right? 'Cause there's an element there. It takes
Yeah.
both of us.
Yeah.
Conflict probably usually means that both of us are involved in some way. Some way.
That's almost always the case.
Mhm.
But how winsome is it when you can go into the conversation and own what you need to own first? So, I'm not giving myself any awards for how I handled
Yeah.
this situation with my friend, but in that case, I knew that I was still angry about some things and we still needed to process, but I
Sure.
knew that the best shot at us having the conversation was, I started with, this is hard for me.
Yeah.
I'm really embarrassed about how I acted
Yeah.
last night, right? And I think that just sets the table.
Yeah. It levels the ground.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
you just modeled the vulnerability to do repair work, and it won't happen always because some people will not lean in with us and do it, but, like, more times than not, when you dare to show that vulnerability, they will show some too. They will choose connection.
Mhm.
Not always,
Yeah.
not always, like, but I more
Right.
times than not, I really do believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
When you say, like, 'cause I love, like, we build those deep relationships and that level of trust through the tension, through the conflict.
Mhm.
I want you to talk more about that because for the most part, we are uber conflict avoidant. We will
Uh-huh.
do everything in our power to avoid tension, to avoid feeling it, to avoid conflict. Um, and plus, like, the way our lives are set up, like, we have so many options to avoid it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just, we think it's easier, right? But
Eh,
that this is the reason that we're up at 3 a.m. This is the reason that we're in
yeah,
need of all kinds of extra help to try to cope with the world we're in and all of that kind of
yeah,
stuff is the fact that we've got all these unprocessed emotions and we haven't dealt with it. So I'm not an expert in this by any
yeah.
stretch, Justine, but back when they started developing family systems therapy
Yes.
as a way of looking at how to help people in their relationships, one of the things that they talk about is this idea of triangulation
Mhm,
that so if you imagine like a mother and a father and a child
mhm.
and mom and dad don't get along so well, say dad's really difficult, mom starts to align with the child and starts to, they start to essentially ally against dad, so that's triangulation.
Yeah.
And in those moments mom starts to say things to their child like, hey, nobody understands me the way you do. I feel all alone except when I'm with you. And they're putting this weight and pressure on the child that the child's really not equipped to handle.
Yeah.
And what starts to happen in those dynamics, and the reason I'm saying this is I think it applies to all relationships.
Mhm.
What starts to happen in those dynamics is this is where we start to lose our sense of self,
True.
right? Because
Yeah.
now we're, and I'm using family systems
Yeah.
language, but now we're enmeshed with each other, and I don't
Yep.
know where you end and I begin.
Yep.
And so now in the future, we grow up. If we're the kid, we grow up. We're now dealing with some like our boss, or we're dealing with a friend, or we're dealing with a family member, and I don't know where I end and you begin anymore. And
Yeah.
I've lost the ability to maintain that necessary tension, to be
Yeah.
able to say, you and I are collaborating. We are in this
Mhm.
relationship together, but I am not you, and you are not me.
Right.
And so how do we navigate when we have bumps, when we disagree, and those kinds of things,
Yeah.
in such a way that we get to have a healthy relationship? I
Right.
think that's where the chaos and stuff, why we're conflict avoidant, is because
Mm.
we don't look at it that way. We think
Yeah.
we should be in lockstep. We should essentially be enmeshed with each other in order to be healthy, but that's not health.
No. 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 It's one of my favorite quotes. That's codependent no more. Where you end, I begin. Where I begin, you end. That's classic. Like,
It's good stuff.
it's so that's good boundary work. And when you even like you combine it with attachment styles, right? You combine it
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
identity work, right? Like,
Oh
because in
yeah.
that triangulation, like, how much of one's identity is getting lost because you only have your identity from the other person, and that's not identity.
Yeah, yeah. That's totally. So I can share a little bit kind of anecdotally. I grew up in a home where it was not widely, it was not accepted. It was not okay in my house growing up for me to be angry.
Okay.
And yet I come from both sides of my family. Tempers are like they run wild.
Yeah,
And so, but for me as the child, with the parents, it was when I started to get angry, then that would get shut down.
got it.
Um, and I've got great parents. I'm not complaining
Yeah,
about them, whatever. That was
yeah,
just our dynamic.
yep,
But as a result, as I got older, that was one of the places where when I started to feel myself get angry at times, it was really hard for
yeah,
me to allow myself to go there or to express how I was feeling. I had a supervisor who every once in a while would get the brunt of it. I would just call and say, okay, look, I've been thinking about this and I'm frustrated and I need to express that. And one of the most healing things was when my boss would say to me, it's okay. I like it when you get angry. Like, I want to hear what you have to say. It's
Uh-huh.
safe for you to tell me
Yeah.
that, right? And we can disagree on the other side of it, but it was
Mhm.
allowing me to get to a place where I could stand on my own 2 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's so I it is one of the things when I'm teaching the emotional well-being lesson, like, because so many households, either anger was the only emotion that was allowed to be expressed, or you were the child that you weren't allowed to express anger at all, right? Like, it
Right.
we fronted as perfect or whatever else within the walls or things like that. And then when you really also understand how anger works, like, almost always it's a secondary emotion, not always,
Mm-hmm.
almost always. So, like, what's
Mm-hmm.
really underneath it? And let's get curious about it. It's because it's also can be it's one of the emotions that can be super dangerous and do a lot of damage if we don't
Yeah.
get curious about it.
That's right.
Like,
Yeah, that's right.
you deny it, of course it came out in horrible ways because you can't deny emotion.
Yeah. 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 And, we spend our whole lives trying to figure out how to do that well. And,
Oh, yeah.
for years it was like trying to figure out how to have a voice. And now I think
Yeah.
there are some people in my life who would be like, all right, we heard you. We got it.
Yeah. Totally.
So we keep trying to figure it
Me
out.
too. Me too. That's part of the work, though. That's just learning,
Totally.
growing, and changing.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
it.
Absolutely.
And in order to do that, you have like, you keep turning towards yourself, towards others, which requires you to turn toward yourself and understand it.
Mm, Yeah,
You have to.
it's great.
It's so good. It's so good. Well, are you ready for your last 2 questions? It's already time.
Is it time already?
That's
I'm not sure I'm ready. The surprise question, but yes, bring it on. Well,
what everyone says. Okay. Well, the
let's just
closing
do it.
question that is coming. When did courage look different than you expected, and what did it teach you?
Well, yeah. So I knew this one was coming, so I
Yep.
gave it some thought. What I want to say about that is that I think often when we talk about courage, we talk about it in the context of doing something that we're afraid to do
Yeah.
or stepping into something we're afraid to step into. There's a courage of subtraction as well as courage of addition. I don't know why I
Okay.
said addiction, but subtraction.
Yeah.
Um, and so the courage not to do something. So one of my classic stories is that growing up, I really wanted to be a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
So I've got guitars in the background, and
Mhm.
that's something that's been a part of my life is music. But
Yep.
I really wanted to um, I wanted to be like one of the great songwriters. I had Paul Simon and Bob Dylan and then some more contemporary artists in my
Yeah.
ears, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I got to a place where I realized I'm okay at the guitar. I've got a decent voice. I can do music. I'm not that good of a songwriter. It just doesn't come natural to me. And it was really frustrating. I kind of had to
Yeah.
die a death there, right?
Yeah.
But Henry Cloud, and he's got a book called Necessary Endings. In that book, he
Uh-huh.
says it's really, really good when you could get to a place of hopelessness about something, which sounds totally counterintuitive because we want hope.
Yeah.
But 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 when we can get to a place of hopelessness about something and allow that thing to die, then it gives room for new things to be born.
Totally.
And so, I had to come to a place where I allowed that idea of becoming a singer songwriter. And my point is that takes a tremendous amount of courage, because
Does.
if you've built your life based on I'm going to do this,
Right.
or I am this kind of person, or whatever,
Yeah.
and you live in denial if you can't come to a place where you go, you know what, it's time to let that
Right.
go and embrace the unknown, embrace
Right.
what replaces it. And it probably took me a good 25, 30 years to really figure out what it was that replaced that desire in me to be a songwriter.
Uh-huh.
Um, and in some ways now in this new season of life, I feel like I'm going through it all over again.
Yeah.
But the courage of subtraction is
Yeah.
to say no to something or to let something go is really, really important.
It's so, so important. We don't talk about it enough either. That's so good.
Hmm.
That's so
Hmm.
good. Oh, that's so
Cool.
good. All right. Surprise question.
Okay.
What does loving others well require of you that is surprising?
What does loving others well require me that's surprising? Um, Yeah, it's that I think I'm constantly surprised. Hmm. By the balance of self-care and self-sacrifice.
Ooh.
Um, and it's probably something I know intellectually, but I continually am surprised every time I'm confronted with it. So there's um I'm making this up on the fly, Justine, but there's this idea where like I know if I can take good care of myself.
Mhm.
I have my routine in the morning that kind of helps me center for the day. I try to take care of myself physically, with exercise, that sort of thing. So I do the things that I know help set me up to have a good day,
Yep.
to feel well, to be regulated, to have my
Yeah.
emotions in check, all that stuff. Um, but uh, but I'll just give you a tangible example. I'll be in the middle of that morning routine, and one of my kids will walk into my office to say hi to me.
Yep.
And I'm naturally an extrovert, but my morning time is like the other part of me, like the introvert
Yeah.
gets to do its thing for a
Filling up.
couple hours.
You're filling
I'm
up,
filling my
extrovert.
I'm filling my
Yeah.
cup so that I can go be with people.
Yeah.
Um, and one of my boys will walk in and they'll want to talk to me in the morning. And for a long time, it took me a while to listen to them where they finally said, Dad, you're kind of a jerk. When we walk in to say hi, you ignore us. You don't look up from what you're reading. You are, you're like, I can tell you're waiting for me to leave. And so it's that discipline and that balance of being able to go, in order to love others well,
Yeah.
I do need to take care of myself.
For sure.
But when my boy walks into my office in the morning because he wants to connect with his dad, it's time to put the book down,
Right.
right? Because
So
I
good.
I I want my life to be a service to the people that are in my life. I want to be sacrificial in
Yeah.
that way, but it's a
Oh, that's
challenge.
so good. That's so good. That that goes back to live in the tension of caring for ourselves and living self-sacrificially to love others well.
Yeah,
So good.
life is messy, isn't it? And
It
so
is.
you're constantly going back and forth.
Yeah, that's so good. So good.
Mm,
Oh, thank you. All right.
mm.
This has
Well,
been
thank you.
awesome. Thank you. So good. I'm so excited. Okay, where can my community connect with you if they want to connect
So
with you?
yeah, thanks. So right now, you can go to I'm on LinkedIn. That's kind of like my starting place
Yeah.
for most of the things I'm doing, and there'll be more down the road. But right now, LinkedIn is the best place.
Yep.
You can go to the website, which is theunison.company. So that's for my business, the Unison Company. You can
Awesome.
find me there. But LinkedIn's the best spot.
Awesome. We'll link it all in
Yeah,
the show notes. Thank you so much for
awesome.
doing this.
Oh, Justine, thank you. I think you're great, and it was
Thank you.
such a joy to get to share this with you.
I know. I love it. Thank you so much.
All right, you bet.
Thank you for listening to the Courage is Built Here podcast. Whether you're brand new to this work or living it out loud every day, I hope today was helpful, hopeful, and a reminder that you're not alone. What one bit of courage will you take from this episode, and how will you walk it out? If this episode encouraged you, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and please make sure you like and subscribe. New episodes come out every Wednesday on your favorite podcast platform and Fridays on YouTube. For more resources, head to JustineFroelker.com and click to my store. Because courage isn't a one-time thing, it's built right here, one small choice at a time, and especially between us.